for the workshop. So, but we'll do that.
Hey guys, so doing a little formality of introduction to the very awesome Marit, who actually doesn't need it. But yeah, let me just do my thing. A very warm welcome, Marit. It was really interesting talking to you even before the event. She's someone who is not only a technology expert, not only a testing evangelist, but also a community leader, a woman, a true woman in Agile and tech, and a feminist at the core, awesome mother, and a community and thought leader. So, without confusing you all with who she is, I would want to pass on the mic to you, Marit. Before we start with your workshop, it will be really awesome to hear from you a bit about you, to know you more and better. And then we'll all jump on and get our hands dirty with the hands-on workshop that you bring us for today. Over to you.
Thanks. So I noticed that there's a little bit of a confusion on the title of the workshop, depending on where you read. This is how I wrote the title. It's hands-off exploratory testing. It's not hands-on exploratory testing. And I'm kind of wondering, because of that, if you are today expecting that we will be doing exploratory testing, when the idea originally was that we would workshop, so
we are not expecting
do things together.
Yeah, we are just relying on you and your magic and follow you.
Yeah, but the hands-on part of today, it's on management. So the topic of today in particular is management. Like, if you have a thing called exploratory testing, what is managing that like? What are the considerations? What are the, the old wisdoms? What are the new trends? That type of thing. So I could definitely make you do some exploratory testing. That's not a general problem, but today, that's not the plan of what we would be doing. A few words on me. I live in Finland, first of all, so it's late afternoon for me, so very nice time of the day. I don't have to be up very early, or I don't have to be up very late, like perfect timing. So you get me at my kind of best and most awake time. And I've been working here around Finland with things on testing for last 25 years. This is actually my 25th career anniversary. So I've been holding hands-on testing jobs in various companies for 25 years. And I have had a career where I usually kind of I go to an organization and I seem to be a little bit impatient, in the sense that I leave after 2-3 years and I go to the next place. I originally thought of that as in kind of we have this thing called context-driven testing. This idea that we do testing in a different way in different organizations, because context in different companies is different. But it turned into kind of as a kind of a learning thing for me in trying to figure out what does testing really look like. And instead of just, kind of looking at it from the outside like a researcher, what I wanted to do always is kind of suffer from my own decisions. Like, I wanted to be there so that I could also, if I made a proposal and then people followed it, I could also be there to suffer from the consequences so that I would fix it when I felt the pain. Because what I started noticing very early on is that when I made a proposal, kind of picked up something from something that other people had written about, then people were taking that as kind of that's now rules. Rules are saying we must do this. And if I wasn't there to say that I created a crappy rule, people would live by those rules. So that's kind of the background that I had, that I've been a hands-on exploratory tester for years and years and years. And also, as 25 years have passed, I've moved from, of course, managing my own work. We all must manage our own work. And it's actually a really critical core skill for anyone thinking of exploratory testing, is managing your own work. understanding what it is, but also kind of getting to, managing my colleagues' work, managing entire organizations. And the motivation originally for this title and this session is, well, some material that I put here on the mural around the fact that I was the single exploratory tester responsible for end-to-end testing in a system with 20 teams. And you can imagine that it must mean something when you are alone and there's so many different teams. And it probably didn't mean to me what you expect it would mean in general. And that's kind of one of the stories I wanna share with you today, but we'll get to that. So starting off with hands-off exploratory testing and how to manage at scale. This is really, well, there's the links here. You can get them from the mural. Hopefully you can see me pointing at them. So that includes a PDF of everything that is on this mural wall right now. And then there's the pictures as slides. So if I have a slide here, you can find them also available to you. But kind of the core of the thing that comes out of this is this idea that sometimes testing is just too much for a single person. So how do we actually split it in organizations? Like, what are the ways? Like we make developers do unit testing and testers do other testing. Quite typical, but it actually doesn't necessarily always help us with the best possible way of splitting. We make some testers do manual testing and others do automation testing. Very typical. Also, not the best way if you want to actually do really good exploratory testing. Or we could split it by saying we have each team responsible for their own testing in complete, like, entirety. And we have multiple teams, and somehow then we need to work in that sense. And that's more of the world that I live in. And then the other question that we'll address today is kind of, well, what would you do when you're unhappy with the results of testing? Because the fact is that most testers don't know how to test. And that's kind of the core problem of exploratory testing, that we think of it as kind of like it's the filling around all the other things of testing so that we get results that are high enough for the customers and the users. So this might be still a little confusing to you. I can't see the chat while I'm sharing my screen. So if you want to say something, you can put a post-it note here, so that it kind of, when it's in the visibility, I can see it from here. And that's how we will work today. So you can just double click here somewhere and you can get a post-it note. And you can also just, open your mic and try things out in that sense. Before we go into the first discussion part, I wanted to just talk a little bit about this kind of usual experience that people have around exploratory testing. And I think it was maybe like about a year ago, I was doing a conversation in one conference with 3 other people about kind of, we had like a panel on exploratory testing. And there were 3 of us, and it was really interesting to notice that the 3 of us had completely different idea of what exploratory testing is and how we had come to that idea of exploratory testing. I'm the 3rd person here. So I started 25 years ago in a project that was done as a contracting for Microsoft. And the way that testing was framed is that they gave us some things they called test cases. Not very many, but a couple, kind of like basic scenarios to give us an idea of what Excel is supposed to do, or what, in my case, the database program, I can't remember, starts with an A, I've forgotten the name now. But anyway, they gave us kind of, basic instructions of what kind of things need to be, features need to be found. But they also told us that we won't be happy with your work if you run these test cases. This is not the work. The work is go find bugs, find all of them, and if not all of them, as many of them as you ever can. They gave us a budget of time. They said, we will pay you this and this amount of hours. And then they introduced a quality assurance mechanism on the results we were providing as testers, basically saying that even though we gave you the test cases, that's, you know, just a helping thing for you. But the main thing is, if you're missing bugs that our experts, more senior testers, are finding after you, we will take 10% of the money that we pay for you for the hours that we allocated. And it was still kind of, you know, it was still worthwhile. So we weren't losing money, even if we would fail these QAs. But if you failed multiple QA sessions, kind of missing out on the bugs, the assumption from the very first job I ever held was that you would actually no longer be a tester. I think this is how testing should work, actually. Maybe not, you know, firing people, maybe not taking away the money, but the QA idea and the idea that you are expected to provide results and you're expected to kind of get higher. And this type of framing with 25 years of experience, starting from that, you know, first ever project, I never imagined test cases and manual testing were a thing expected of me. That's not my career. That's not ever in my life. I've had managers asking for it, but I have had early on experiences that even when they ask something visible, they call test cases, I am still responsible for the results. Like I am supposed to disobey any instructions. And if it says click once, I should click twice, or maybe click 100 times, whatever is needed, but I am responsible for those results. At the same time, the two other people coming to that session, what came about for me with them is that one of them told me that they had this kind of like, you know, they had discovered exploratory testing so that they had a very different idea, like the test cases they had created and that they were given. They had to actually execute those, exactly those. That was the idea. They had a specification. They spent a lot of hours analyzing specification and turning that into test cases. Some of them manual test cases, some of them automated test cases, but still the process was from a specification we analyze and we end up with test cases by filling in some gaps with tester knowledge. And then this person told that they had this experience that at some point of the project, someone invited this Friday afternoon session, which they called exploratory testing. And the Friday afternoon session was then kind of like, after all this work of creating all the test cases, that Friday afternoon session turned out to be the place where they would find all the bugs. And that's what they called exploratory testing. So I would actually prefer doing a little less of this kind of, you know, spec and tests that miss out on the bugs and start with finding all the bugs. And personally, I would just frame it a little differently, but this is a common way for people to think about exploratory testing as well. It's just not the way that I think of it. And the third one basically said that he had actually an even more strict starting point, in the sense that his organization never actually suggested these Friday sessions. He needed to go to a conference like this one and meet someone, well, someone like me, who told them that if they kept repeating the list of test cases, they would still be missing all of the bugs maybe, and that they would need to kind of like, you know, be awakened to the idea that they're actually responsible for those results. And that actually, if they would think differently, if they would kind of, you know, do exploratory testing, the work wouldn't be so boring. And my core message always is testing is supposed to be fun. So if it's not fun for you, it's probably because you are doing something a little off. So you might want to find the fun somewhere. Also, I put here kind of like slides just to remind us that, you know, it's not just the testers who do this. Automation folks actually also need to figure out exploring, because that's how we figure out what we put in automation. and the programmers, even on unit testing level. When we figure out how would we test things in unit testing, it is still exploratory testing. So different roles kind of take us to the same place. But, you know, before I give you all the answers, I want to now split you into a few groups and get you to discuss how do you manage exploratory testing. Is it something that you're doing kind of, you know, just for yourself, for your own work? Is it a team of testers that is your concern, and what kind of things you do there? Is it maybe a single team, development team, where you are maybe the only tester, or maybe there is one tester who is not you in that team? Or is it kind of like my scenario in the I have no time for keeping my hands on anymore, really multiple teams, some of them with an embedded tester, some of them with developers responsible for the entire testing? So where are you? So I'll split you into groups. I can now get into the breakout rooms. I can see there's 23 people, which means I will create, let's say, 7 groups. That should give us about 3 people per group. And this assigns you automatically, you have 10 minutes, figure out how do you now, with your current best knowledge, how do you manage exploratory testing? So it should be asking you to join a room. Make notes on the wall, put stuff there. That's the place to take notes.
Hello. Am I audible, guys? Sabarish, Devya.
Hi.
Hi. So you guys understood, right? So what Marit asked us to do. So I think 10 minutes we have. So it's 5:34 right now. We have 10 minutes. Can we start, guys?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Give me a second, actually. All right, guys, I think we can keep on discussing because maybe, in a few minutes I'll go to another room to just, do what kind of discussion is going on. Yeah, so I think we can get started. So what she said is like, what kind of exploratory testing we do in our teams, right? One second, I'll just. Okay.
Did people have ability to talk here?
Yes, yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
And
so
round of checking on you.
okay. Okay. So we just started discussing about, what you just asked, right? All right. So give me a second. I'm just opening this. Okay, guys, who would like to go first? Maybe, Divya or Sabarish.
Sonia, can you just repeat what we have to do?
Actually, yeah, what Marit has just, explained, like, her experiences and all, right, on exploratory testing. So
Yeah.
it's like, discuss how you manage your exploratory testing in your team. So there are 4 points, like your own, like you are the one like who would be taking care of, our exploratory testing efforts. Then single team of testers. Then the second point is single team with embedded testers. Third is multiple teams with embedded testers. So this is what uh, she wants us to discuss. Let's say 5 star. So for me, it's like I also perform like exploratory testing. And again, I think I fit in second point, single team of testers, right? So whosoever testers are in my team, so we are the one like who go for this, exploratory testing. I think that's my
Sonia,
category.
can I interrupt you for a second? Like, what is the exact meaning of embedded tester? Who is that supposed to be? I'm not familiar with that word.
1 second, Satish.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of, she told, right? There are 3 categories basically, right? One who perform, manual testing. Then the second one is like automation testers, and then what do you call developers also, right? We tell them like perform unit testing or whatever, right? So I think these are sort of embedded testing that she's trying to say. Maybe Divya, if you know it better, so let me correct you.
Actually, I have only 2 years of experience in testing, and right now I'm trying to resume my career after like a gap. So when I was in when I was working, I was the only tester in my team. So it
Okay.
was on my own. Like I have been doing my testing on my own. So
Okay, it means first category you are
yeah,
into,
first
right?
category. Yeah, I have no knowledge about embedded tester. Sorry.
Okay. I think
Yeah.
yours is first category. Okay.
Yeah, I was in manual testing, so I was the only
Mhm.
one in the team.
Okay.
I was completely in automation. So usually what I do is I get the test cases from the functional team and then I just automate that. And if there's any other kind of bugs and all, if I find, then I'll add them to the test cases.
Okay. So
There's
guys,
no kind of exploratory there. Yeah.
okay. All right. I think yeah, for me it is a bit different. We do lack automation testers. So yeah, so we do perform exploratory to a lot of extent. Plus, I have to move to another room, right, just to record what's going on there. Okay.
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 Yeah.
So I'm just
Okay,
joining
Sonia.
that. Yeah. I'm going there.
Kind of your level of kind of how you manage is you manage your own work and you try to take care of
Yeah, so
the-
the basic idea is when I start with my work, basically the charter or session kind of stuff in a 1 hour or 1.5 hour session I do, and usually I record 45 minutes of whatever I'm doing, and based on that I take another 30 minutes to write up, and mostly it's about whatever I'm doing and I'm then writing up, and probably normally I try to do it 2 or 3 times in a go, and mostly I find the deviation because it's an existing application, not a new application. So things are more like it's a small change and you need to stick around it only. So yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works for me as well. Very much kind of like for myself. I can organize my work whatever way I want, and what eventually matters is the results. And
Yeah.
sometimes in some teams, people are concerned that testing, well, I have heard actually this way, that testing is so awful that no one would do it voluntarily. So unless you can show that you have, completed 20 test cases a day, you probably were drinking coffee all day. This is what
So
someone told me.
there is a challenge which I'm going to face. I mean, this is just a coincidence that tomorrow we have an internal meeting with other team members. Some new team members have joined, and they have an issue that there is no written test case as of now. So they are not able to relate it to things. So I have to kind of explain how they can follow or something. So tomorrow, actually, I have this meeting in my team.
Yeah. It's a typical conversation, and like, I'd like to see what you are doing so that I can also do the same thing and learn from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so relatable, actually, what Marit you said, right? So at the end, it's just like, what we have tested, actually, what is the result that is coming out of it. And I think not related to this question that you asked, but in your presentation when you were talking and you're like, okay, like testing is, our, whole team's responsibility basically. And yeah, like it's again embedded system, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And again, this whole kind of like sessions and making detailed notes. I have a colleague who records videotapes, basically everything that she does. But what she does with that then is that it might be that she records one day of testing, and then she spends 3 days watching the recording so that she can slow down what happens, because she feels so overwhelmed with our system that she can't see the bugs in the moment. But when she analyzes the videos after, she can, slow down the world around her.
Yeah.
And again, that's a junior tester. I think it's a brilliant way for her to actually address the needs that she has. And similarly, like you were talking, Chandra.
I do. I mean, I recently learned this from Ajay, and I try to record everything. I mean, at least when, especially in web application, when sometimes you are not able to recreate things, you have the evidence. At least the worst thing you can, I mean, the good thing you can do is you can see that actually that thing has happened because you were recording it.
Yeah. So for me, again, at 25 years, when I say something happened, I get usually, they believe me. And I do recognize, from my past that it wasn't always that way. So I don't need the videos for that reason anymore. But again, for videos, kind of like for, if I don't remember kind of what did I do and what might have happened, it's a source of a lot of different kind of ideas that I could use. And if someone doesn't believe that I was doing anything, I can always show, like a really nicely archived listing of videos that I do not ever want to watch again. And they never want to watch again. Like, they are not that kind of videos, but I could show it if that's the concern. But it's not helpful, like the problem that you said yesterday, it's not helpful for the new that you will have tomorrow, that it's not helpful for the new people coming in, figuring out what did you do and why did you do it, is to try to figure it out from your actions. Your actions are not the testing. It's actually the things that happen inside your head that is the testing. And it might actually happen
To do that.
Yeah, Sonia, just we were discussing about how we are working as on the exploratory testing till now.
Yeah,
Hi,
I just
Sonia.
hello. I just going to one breakout room to other breakout room, and discussion was quite great actually. This is the third room, so yeah. So, yeah, I hope like you guys discuss. Like for me, if I tell you, I come under the I'll tell you the single team of testers. This is second category, right? So what?
Got it.
So yeah, single team of
Yeah.
testers. Yeah.
So Satish have good, well, Suresh, sorry, Suresh have good insights of a few of the exploratory testing, what he was telling. Suresh, maybe you can also discuss the same with Sonia, but combinedly, we can, as a small summary, we can say that we both have different approaches in our project now for exploratory testing, but I think are uh, we both agree that exploratory testing we get more defects in the negative scenarios kind of part, or we get more requirements gaps when we do exploratory testing.
Yeah.
Suresh, you want to add something here?
Yeah, then that's what we were discussing about. The new team member who is joining over has a new fresh of mind, and he is not biased with the existing knowledge from the different stakeholders. So he will be able to do the exploratory testing better than the experienced one. That was my thought.
All right, I think we're back in the room. So let's hear from Salesforce testing guy. What was the answer?
Okay, thank you so much, Karen and Marit, for the same. And my answer is like you must have a bit idea about the domain for the same, and you must have an eager to learn in order to explore the something in new product. For example, exploratory word itself includes explore. And whenever as a tester you are going to explore something, you will definitely get a very high chance to, report that particular bug that is directly impacting the business. So this is my perception and experience, according to me, that I personally believe. So this was my answer in a icebreaker team, I hope.
Sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Other things, what did you talk about in your groups? Any kind of summaries or core observations that someone shared that you want to promote?
Marit, we had a combination of 3 different approaches because 3 different situations that we had. So one of the most common things I think in most organizations, and this is something that came out, was that very little time to explore. It's more of a structured, scripted testing, if I may call it. And then there are situations when the product is already released, so the focus is largely on doing regression. Only for new product, new feature releases, there are some scripted testing that is done. And exploratory testing is only at the fag end when you are in a hurry to show something to the stakeholders and the scripted tests are not giving you much. So that is one situation. The other situation was mine, which is pretty much similar to what you mentioned as your situation, where there are multiple teams. Some teams have embedded testers, some teams don't have embedded testers, but the focus is largely on exploring and then doing some scripted work alongside it, trying to see, okay, how much can be automated, what can be automated, what cannot be. Whereas the focus is to give the testers the freedom to go ahead and explore. And like Gandharv, the Salesforce testing guy, he mentioned, the word explore is the focus. Find out more, gather as much information as you can. The focus is not on pass or fail. The focus is on the information that you're collecting so that you give it to the stakeholders and then they take a call. Okay, what needs to be done? Whether we write a new feature for this or whether we release it as it is, whether, of course, along the way, of course, you get a lot of bugs. They, of course, need to be tackled. But your focus shifts from just the bugs to more towards exploring and finding out more. So that is something. And the approaches that normally, what I take with my customers is to suggest them with session-based test management, where we time box the testing into 90 minutes or 120 minutes, depending on what has been agreed with the team. And then we try and understand, what goes on during that entire session. It may just be one experiment that we are running, or it may be a set of 3-4 experiments. I tend to call them experiments because when we call it a test, it is a combination of 1 or more experiments combined together, and that gives you more possibilities than just pass or fail. So this is my way of looking at it, and this is what we discuss in our group as well.
Yeah, sounds quite typical.
Yes.
All right. Any other observations from any of the other groups? Someone who would want to share?
I was in same group as Rajesh. In fact, I learned. So I used to think that exploratory testing is like random testing. You pick the requirement and you go ahead and explore the application. But from Rajesh, I got to know that there is a lot of thought process involved, right? When he talked about session testing, knowing the domain, adding things on the go. So that's one learning or one takeaway for me from that discussion.
Yeah. And for me, it's very typical, at least, that I write test cases as an output of my exploratory testing. Like if I need to create scripted tests, whether it's, automation and scripts for that, or whether it's manual scripts that I need to write down, if anyone is ever requiring that, I usually don't have that requirement that I have to write manual test cases, almost ever nowadays. But if I do have that, it's usually an output of my exploration, kind of, I'm choosing the best things to write down, and I might have, done hundreds of things around so that I can choose the best one. So I try to not stay just with the specification, but I take the specification, I learn about the specification with the application, and make the so-called scripted testing more exploratory by nature. So again, these kind of stretches are typical that we need to do in our organizations, depending on how strict the rules are that we have to work in. It looked like someone wanted to comment something on this. Maybe you had something. Right. So let's jump into then kind of like sharing some of the material that I collected together for you here. And why does this material here exist? Like, I really don't want to spend 1.5 hours in just explaining to you how to think. I would like to have more of a conversation. I would like to have more of a workshop type of an activity. But the first activity that we did, it already shows that we come from very, very different organizations. Like, sometimes we are really managing just ourselves, like the gentleman that I was talking to in group number 3, where other people were not talking out loud, like they probably didn't have the best connection to do that. They're just kind of, listening in to the session rather than actively being able to participate. Some of the things that he said really resonated with me. Like, he said that he sometimes takes videos of the things that he does, so that he can show that to others if anyone asks. He said that he doesn't have to manage anyone other than himself. Like, it's about his work and quality of his work. That's the exploring that he needs to manage. There's no team of testers. It's just that he is in a team where there is a tester, but also the rest of the team. And it gets really fuzzy, kind of like, what of this is now the part that I would call exploratory testing. Actually, I would call all of it exploratory testing. But also he said that he is about to have, very soon in the future, colleagues who are asking, can you give us detailed instructions of what you have done in the past so that we can do the same thing? Kind of the newbie coming in argument that the newbies need test cases to learn, which is, by the way, not true. They can also do their own exploration. I have had 15-year-olds who, given a little bit more guidance and a little bit more time, when they build their own test cases, do a lot better job at testing than if they would follow anyone else's test cases. Like, the struggle, the learning, it actually enhances the quality of the work that newbies are doing. But it's, we are used to asking for the, show me what you did. And there's many different ways of passing this on. So in the kind of past experiences, one of the things I've been working on for quite many years, this was something I originally didn't have in mind that we would need to talk about much today, but I really do want to mention that at least, is that a typical way of managing exploratory testing is kind of like you have these mechanisms around the tester. Like, it could be just a tester, and it could be all just a single tester's mechanisms. And it starts with someone who knows what they're doing and is disciplined. It starts with that someone having an idea of spending it, we call it a session. And a lot of people think session means like 45 minutes or 90 minutes. It could also mean day of work. You come to work in the morning, you leave in the evening. That's also a session. Or morning before your daily meeting and afternoon after the daily meeting. That's also a session. So it doesn't necessarily have to be uninterrupted even when you're managing or thinking about how you manage, but it's some unit of time, and you have an idea of what you would do with that unit of time. And instead of a test case for that unit of time, you would have a charter, and you would be thinking, what did I achieve today or in this session, whatever the time frame is, and you would somehow be able to say, since yesterday's daily meeting, I've been testing this and this and this. I think I have found the 3 bugs, and I would like to ask you about them. And maybe there's 5 questions, and I'm not sure how exactly to progress from here. So you have an idea of what you've done and you're able to talk about it. Typically, you would also have some kind of metrics. I already kind of threw in numbers, and it's very much of a core to the way that I talk about the work that I do as an individual tester. I know how many questions, well, here's the kind of the types of things that I usually track. How many bugs, how many questions, how many things I want to leave behind in automation I had in a particular session. So I keep track of those type of things. I usually have to sometimes, not every day, but sometimes I have to tell others. So I debrief. Sometimes the others, when I debrief, they try to help me be better. It's very uncommon for me nowadays, but I debrief to my developers. And of course, they are trying to help me be better with why are you wasting your time on that? That's the usual conversation that we have. And then we can talk about why am I testing the kinds of things that I have decided to test. There might be some kind of coaching or even pairing, like you don't maybe work alone on the things. And then maybe over longer periods of time, you would have snapshots of what do you think the quality is. And there can be more and less fancy ways of doing it. My personal preference is, quality is good. There's some things about quality we know, but knowing the local expectation, maybe it's good enough. And well, we shouldn't be talking, we should be fixing type of reporting. And similarly with coverage, I think I really know, well, I know a little, well, I don't know at all. And if you think quality is good and I don't know at all, you actually don't know that quality is good, which is the most typical problem that we have on talking about testing, that before we've done it, we have an empty canvas of bugs, and we really don't know how to speak of those when we yet have not done much of testing. So kind of like, these different bits and pieces, you have a lot of different ways of organizing for these. Does this sound familiar to anyone? This is not exactly session-based test management, but session-based test management has very specific rules around these different pieces of management. So session-based test management basically says session is at most 90 minutes. And it says a charter should be written down with the details. And it gives us a way of managing metrics, particularly about our use of time, whether the time goes on testing, setup, or bugs, or off charter. And that helps us draw nice graphs of is our testing progressing. Someone about to comment something.
Marit, Sonia here. So
Yep.
I can see here playbooks, right? And then I think we have something under that coverage. I don't know what's that, but how do we make sure, like, I don't know, working on playbooks and all, right? That can be time consuming or so.
So usually, like, this is kind of like this here is putting down documentation. Like, what kind of documentation would you write? Like the absolute minimum documentation out of exploratory testing is bug reports. Like Ken Kainer said at some point that a tester who can't report bugs well is like a fridge light that is only on when the door is closed, not much use. So bug reports, having good conversations about the information we are providing, and bug is, anything that might bug a user, having those conversations and having reactions to those conversations, that's the minimal documentation. But when we want to share with the team how much work there is remaining, creating some kind of backlog of all the ideas that we haven't yet done might be necessary. When we want to have new people join the team later, maybe some kind of feature listing, coverage outline of all the features would be useful. And a playbook, for me, it's usually 1 or 2 A4s of text of like, if you are new to this area, what should you know? So for example, right now I work in aviation, and it's not obvious to people what weather in aviation is. So I usually write, the basic rules of the domain into a playbook. So it's not detailed instructions on how to test, but kind of the things you need to know on why, so that you can deduce the what. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely, Maya. And thanks for that, actually.
Yeah. So what I try to do is usually like think in terms of how much are we investing time into different kinds of testing activities. Kind of exploratory testing as an approach for me, it's like the box of thinking. We have a budget and we are supposed to do the best possible testing with that budget. And best possible testing usually isn't writing the most documentation. Sometimes it feels like some projects believe that it is. Like, for example, my project that I help now, which is a new project for me. When I came in, they had 5,000 written test cases, 5,000. I calculated on my first days with that project that if I would read the test cases, and it would take me 10 seconds to reach each of them, I would spend 11 full working days just reading through the test cases. That's not a good use of my time. So it is actually not the best information that they have left behind with those 5,000 test cases. It is actually probably the worst, because I could very easily vanish for 2.5 weeks into just reading them through, so that I would have an idea of what kind of things this team has addressed in the past. So rather than reading them, I actually deleted all of them. That was my first action. And then I started exploring and creating just a coverage outline of different components we had and functionalities that those components are giving. And for anything on a checklist, I can use anything from 3 minutes to 3 days to test it. And it depends on the change that happens in the project, whether I would spend 3 minutes or 3 days. Not on the test case. So the test cases by default, or the test checklist items, by default, they have no kind of like, this is how quickly I can execute it. It is just a helping item on the list. But this is kind of, a typical frame of management. And session-based test management very much comes to that. What I wanted to then address with you as a thing that you might also end up running into at some point, in addition to this kind of, personal and closest colleague or closest team management, is that you might end up sometimes in what I ended up like. If you are assigned a test manager of a big project, that is usually a different expectation from what you would do as a tester in the team. Actually, that one has left from here. So the problem for me was that when I joined Vaisala 2.5 years ago for the product that I was starting to work on, they said they would like me to do end-to-end testing. That was the assignment that they gave me. They put me in a single team and said that from that team I should do end-to-end testing. But that single team was only one of the teams in the entire system. And we had over 20 different teams contributing to the entire system. There had been someone before me in that team, and they had started to address this with test automation, end-to-end test automation. And by the time I got to run the test automation about a week after I started and after the previous person had left, none of the automation worked, because you can imagine that with this number of teams, someone had changed something and the communication wasn't quite working, so that the automation, well, I would know exactly what to fix in the automation, and the automation wasn't really yet complete in the sense that you could very easily read it. It was just getting started. So what I ended up doing is that instead of me either manually or with automation creating end-to-end test cases, I would look at how to do exploratory testing in this kind of a problematic situation, as in I will work with different people in each of these teams, but all of the responsibilities of getting things tested must be off my hands and in somebody else's hands. So I kind of summarized this solution that I ended up implementing for exploratory testing into these 3 principles. We have a good neighbor principle. So if you have 2 teams that are interfacing each other, they are both responsible for the system perspective of those 2 bits and pieces working together. And to be good neighbors, they would need to be telling the other what they changed. And if they can't test the changes alone, they can always pair with their neighbor. And when they didn't do that naturally, because usually organizations, new organizations being asked to pair, don't do it naturally, I would show up and I would do ensemble testing with 2 neighbors. And that was how I defined my work. I turned everything continuous, meaning that we had this idea that we would, in the end of the project, do a big release of all these different bits and pieces. The first thing I implemented was a test environment where everyone would deliver every single day. Basically, every pipeline would end with delivering to this common end-to-end integrated environment. And I would ask every single team to work in that continuous or the shared environment so that we had all different teams' eyes on that. So again, quite a simple principle, but making things continuous and so that we could have a working system that we added new functionalities on top of, also introducing originally pilot releases like real customers, but very small numbers, and then making it continuous releases for the entire system, also on the production side, and creating a principle of only supporting 2 latest versions. So this was something I needed to create. Maybe sounds very high level management in that sense, but this is something I needed to do to get end-to-end testing done. And the 3rd principle I needed to do is this sustaining agency principle. And all of these details of detailed mechanisms, I don't want to actually go through all of these. We can take a look at them and you can ask about them if you want to. But all of them are founded basically on this idea of agency, which is, I'm gonna zoom in if I can. Let's just get to a little bigger one like this, that the foundation of exploratory testing that I always seem to need to explain to people is the idea that it was born from the idea that it creates bad results if we separate test design and test execution. Similarly, it creates bad results if we split manual and automated testing. That's what I call contemporary exploratory testing. And the bad results come from the fact that we don't learn in the same way through documentation, through a handoff, as we do if we are actually working on the thing ourselves. So the most impactful results come from places where agency is sustained. So instead of splitting someone to do test design and someone to run those test cases, those 2 would never be split. Instead of splitting someone to do test automation and someone else to do manual testing, same thing, those 2 would need to be put together. This was the principle that I taught to all of the teams. And it took us to this idea that we can actually automate. Well, actually, we can get everything manual done while we are trying to automate. Just like we can get everything tested while we are rehearsing to writing our test scripts, we can get everything manual done while rehearsing to write automation test scripts. And it required a little bit of new skills. What I've also put here on this material is this idea that, you know, all testing is exploratory as long as it's the verb, but not all testing is exploratory as per organization's expectations. And it's usually the organization's expectations that are removing the so-called agency, our choices, and the active learning. So what we're talking about here is changing organizations, not just doing testing. And then I put here for you also, I put a couple of slides on the idea of what usually is the thing that needs to happen so that exploratory testing can succeed. I maybe realized it myself with, well, there's a really great talk by Alexandra Kasapu already from, I think it's like maybe 10 years ago. We were in the same project back then. And what happened is that I did one of those quality assurance things that I talked about in the beginning to her when she joined as a new tester in our project. And the difference between her thinking that she had done all the testing and me waking her up to realize that she yet hadn't with a quality assurance activity, I found a couple of new things, but after waking up, she found 29 things. And there's a whole story that she tells about how that is. But I had another story that I also put here kind of for you from this week. I had this little exploratory testing exercise that I gave to people as interview exercise. They do it solo. They find about 2 out of 23 bugs. And they're able to barely write 4 test cases. Whereas putting 4 people together in an ensemble for the same time frame with the same assignment, they could find 19 out of the 23 bugs. They had 15 of the bugs reproduced with test automation. So I have the picture of the test automation they wrote there. And they can run it across 3 browsers. So they also found something which is a browser-specific problem because of that. So you can choose to do things kind of like, you know, management is about making those choices in some ways. You can choose to also do things differently. But this kind of takes us then to the second exercise that we wanted to do that I wanted to do today, which is around what can you do with agency. So I'm again going to split you into those groups. And now with the focus of agency and all the material of what kind of mechanisms I might have chosen myself on maintaining agency so that people can do learning within their head instead of having to always have multiple people, and then having multiple people by sharing the activity rather than doing a handoff. What kind of things you could do in your own projects that would enable you to have more agency in your exploratory testing? Like, do you have it now? Like, is organizational expectation something that takes it away from you? And what could you do specifically that could increase that power to decide? What things would you need solved and how you could kind of resolve that if you have ideas? So we are again splitting into groups. We are now 14 people, I think. So I'll try splitting us into different groups this time. It's creating 3 breakout rooms, and I hope it manages to give you some active new people that you can share experiences with. What's blocking you from having more agency? What could you do personally to be more active in the way that you test? What could you suggest in your organizations? And any questions you might have. Collect those with post-its on the wall around the question. Right. I'll let it assign you. So you'll have now bigger groups. And I hope you find good ideas and answers from your peers. And I'll do rounds on between different groups. 15 minutes.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, hi team. There is a
Hi.
there is a lot of background noise. There is a Ganpati Visarjan which is going on. So I will be
Okay.
muted.
All right. No problem, sir. Hi, Archana.
Hi. Hello all.
Hi, Karen.
All right. So I've been thinking about this since you started talking about the problem, and I'm trying to think of like concrete processes, but the thing that I keep circling back to is that, like, me personally, I need, in order to do the best job, I need psychological safety. I need a safe place in which to explore, a place that I feel comfortable. But I'm looking for more something that would be more of a process driven answer. Does anybody else have any thoughts?
I think what you just said, Karen, I agree with, in some sense, basically this psychological safety is quite, crucial, I feel, right? And again, being a tester, sometimes, we don't get that authority, and it's like, yes, we are the one, uh, you know, quality is for everyone. Like the whole team is responsible for this, but because we are tagged as QA, so it's like, you are the person. But again, from where authority comes, right? So maybe, what I have started doing, it's like, because sometimes we have, quite a big feature. And if you compare the ratio in between, dev and QA team, it's huge, right? 8 to 2, right? 6 to 2. So things like that. I think everyone can, feel it, right? What I'm saying. Um, and what I've started doing is like when we have a big feature, these are the, basic, set of, test cases maybe, because for dev team, they need something. Okay, what needs to be tested, where you need our help, right? First of all, maybe, go and ask. If we need some of your time, that can be one of the process, and that, that actually helped me and my team, right? We used to burn out a lot when it comes to, validating things and the big features, I believe. So that is one thing that helped us in a greater extent.
So in order to kind of consolidate that into a post-it note, would it be as simple as saying pair programming can help? Or how would you say it?
Yes, I would say pair testing, not pair, maybe again, not pair programming. Pair programming
Sorry.
definitely, because yeah. Yes, so again, so I call that in my team, it's like you all have heard about pair programming. So now let's do pair testing, right? So that when they find the issues in their own code, and then they see, okay, how crucial is that, issue is, and how our customer will get impacted because of that issue, maybe they'll get that sense of urgency of finding, maybe issues in the system, right, which can be prevented more, early in the development life cycle, right? So I think that's one of the processes that really helped me out. And again, that's kind of, exploratory testing. We all have to be domain expert, I feel, bit of domain expertise we need to get.
Right, Sonia, I agree with you.
in also this pair testing along with the development team also is one of the good example to break the myth that always in testers mission things will not work, but in developers mission things will work. There are so many defects, that we usually get a comment saying that it's all working fine in our mission, so we are not able to reproduce it, so we can't take it as a defect. But they really don't understand what are all the other ways that particular scenario can be tested to come out with a list of defects. But then when we do this kind of pair testing, we give them a different way of observing the functionality where it unbounds the hidden defects. So then they agree, yes, yeah, this needs to be fixed and this is a valid defect. So even we in our project also started doing this pair testing, I'm sorry. It was now even suggested by development team only. So they used to say, yes, most of the defects that you people are raising, we are not able to reproduce it. So we better feel like do a testing together for us to understand where exactly the fix is required in the code. So this is actually helping us in saving our time and effort and making them understand, yes, where exactly the fix is required in the code. This is one of the effective way.
Yeah, Archana, in this particular case, whatever, even I have experienced it since when I entered to the testing. So what we do in this case is we have one separate test machine, which is disconnected from the development environment and the test environment. Okay, so on that test, we get paired with the developer and other product owners and other.
I don't think it's because I don't think it's an ideal way to, like it's an ideal way to do so how you would have planned and how you would have done it without any kind of pressure or without stretching yourself. You would be doing your best work, and when you are like cutting down on things, so of course some areas you have like left out or you will be doing it in the next cycle, so that is a slighter risk. Also, since you are stretching yourself out, so of course human mind and body has some limitations, so if you are stretching yourself, then there is a chance that your efficiency will not be like that much high when you are like fresh or you are not stretched. So I think that is something which removes our agency. So any other thoughts?
Those are like amazing points.
Yeah, I agree, and that definitely changed my view at first. Like what you said is right. At times, when you are doing retesting for third or fourth times, it really gets boring, and there is no doubt about it.
Even I feel same as like whenever I was into testing, somehow our time was never considered. Like, okay, in fact, when we used to ask for time, people used to come and negotiate with us. Okay, can you help us? Okay, this is a must-have bug. This is like good to have, nice to have. So a lot of pressure was on us. Okay, rather than giving us that enough time. So whenever there was like a time crunch, it used to be taken care from the testers a time, and people used to think that okay, if we'll add more tester, that should resolve your problem. But that's not the case. You cannot just add anyone randomly, right? Because testing also requires a domain knowledge. Plus, you've been like, there are folks who have always been a part of that project from the inception.
Yes.
Suddenly you'll add someone, maybe even what that used to do is maybe they used to raise a lot of false alarm. Okay.
Correct.
And somebody has to train them, or we had to align someone to just review their bugs and then create a new bug for all the valid scenarios, right?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, I have also like experienced something similar to that in the past, so I can agree, because it's obvious, right? Because they don't have much we can say knowledge about the application, so I'm not saying, so there is benefit also that we are getting a fresh set of eyes with fresh perspective, but the timing is very bad. If you want, we can have some kind of bug based or something, so that we are getting like another set of eyes or another point of view to like like to increase quality of our product. But like at the release time, if you think that adding more testers at the runtime, so it's like more risk and lesser rewards, I believe.
Shekhar, would you like to add anything from your end? Shekhar, Divya? No?
Maybe one point, Jyoti, you just said, like, multiple rounds of testing, and then when it comes to, okay, taking some time out of someone, so it's again, the testing area, right? It's like now do this in 5 hours. Let's an example, right? And time allocated when we started, what we planned was it's like 2 days, right? But again, right? So that's a pain point. I feel that, and I totally, I'm on.
So, Deepthi, after listening to all of us, you have any point for us? What would you suggest? Like, okay, you've heard from us. Now, from a third person, what would you suggest we should do?
No inputs as of now, just absorbing.
Okay. Okay, so should we wait or?
I think we can jump back to the main room.
Right?
We can look at the board together. One of us can again share it and see what others have to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Guys.
Help show other risk areas. So not necessarily that I'm responsible for quality, because I believe that everyone's responsible for quality, but specifically coaching that part might be the way that I would tie that in for me.
Yes. Even one thing that I personally believe, maybe I was on your company's customization workflow, it plays a very vital role, because if it is in the favor of a tester now, you are very blessed. If it is not in your favor now, you have to be so that, like, why, there are n number of questions occur at that moment in time. So as a tester, it's our responsibility to test in that particular way, where as a beginner, if a beginner wants to start their career in the field of a software testing, he or she must have a very balanced approach between that UI UX testing, also as important as functional and non-functional. Because at an initial level as a beginner, we are neglecting all those test cases. For example, if my behind like Salesforce written, if Salesforce there is a spelling mistake or a font change is there, we can't do anything. But as a you can say that quality keeper, a very good word by Suresh. Thank you so much for highlighting that particular word. It's our responsibility to give a quality deliver. What I personally believe.
Yeah, I agree with you on this, because normally responsibility is everyone's, but at last the testers is accountable. And whenever there's something goes odd, so only the tester will be accountable to answer why it has been skipped. That is my personal experience as well.
That's great.
Alrighty, I'm going to go back to the main room, but thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a built-in functionality here, so you can always just turn it on. I was using that when the Selenium committee had a meeting in Berlin, and I was remote. I was the only one remote. I was hoping it could hear what they say when I can't. Didn't turn out good, so no, didn't help me. All right, I've brought you back, and I'll share my screen from here. And I'll just show that to you soon. But like we had now actually 2 active groups, and the third one kind of died out right from the beginning. I don't know how the lottery works, so but I tried moving people to some room when they seem to be active, but hopefully you found a good group. So I listened to both groups for some of the time. Maybe this group would like to kind of from where this came from. Would you like to give like a summary? You don't have to read all of that through, like others can also read it, but just kind of maybe a summary of how was the conversation in this group.
Faz, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. I will give it a try. So we discussed from different approaches that sometimes they like more focus on the business side. Some of the times, not all of the times, it can become means it acts to decrease our agency. Also, we discussed how like sometimes it also happens that it is expected from testers to have test automation skills which they might not have, and then still they are expected to work with it very quickly. So that is sometimes removes their agency. But we also discussed that actual intention behind doing test automation is to make machines do the repetitive work so that humans can do the actual more creative or exploratory work. Also, there is one of the challenge which all of us discussed was that many times it happens that if there is a schedule change in the build is given for testers for testing, it is delayed, but the release date is not moved, then the testers timeline is crunched, and sometimes it poses some challenges. So that was how I can summarize it. Thank you. Jyoti, you can add if I have missed anything.
Yeah, no, Faiz, you covered it all. So the crux is that only.
All right. What about the other group? There's some notes from the other one. Would you like to summarize what your conversation was about?
We had kind of interesting views that come from all sorts of different perspectives. But what we agreed on was the big one at the bottom, is that we have the most agency when by the company that we're working for, the organization that we're working for, doesn't just limit us to finding bugs. Because yes, finding bugs is a big part of what we do, but we also need to understand what it is that we do. And but you know, I'm not putting this very well, but basically don't limit us to just the matrix of you found so many bugs, so you're doing well. We also talked about the fact that the tester is often relegated to the gatekeeper of quality for the project, which is fine because we are responsibility for the quality, but everyone is responsible for quality. But we are the ones who often take the brunt of when things go wrong because of quality issues. So it's like, yes, we are sort of gatekeepers. Sometimes I hate that term, but when we do that, it actually decreases the collaboration among the team because there's one person that's responsible for this quality when everybody else actually should be involved. I don't know if I did a very good job of explaining that. I'm sorry.
I think you did a decent job at explaining that. And again, that's a really difficult one. Like, at least I find myself thinking about it kind of on a daily basis, that I can see that we are finding, well, I am finding things that I shouldn't be finding right now. How do I get the others to feel like they found them? And that's where I use ensemble testing, for example, that I know I found these problems, but I make the developers find the problems because they fix them in really fast pace when they feel they did it themselves. And when I can remove myself from that, but actually I was always there to facilitate, it creates a different kind of an environment. But it is also a lot more draining for me, not just to get to report what I saw, but having to create these learning experiences for others. And that's always the balance that you kind of have to strike on like, how do you build the others up for the future, so that you don't have to be the one who, I sometimes use this phrase, that you're the one who picks up the pizza boxes or points at the pizza boxes in middle of the living room floor, because they keep always leaving them there. So you're kind of, growing people into understanding that. I took some notes from what I was listening on people, kind of like, there was some conversation on like definite things that remove agency, like if you don't feel safe, if you feel you are being blamed, definite no. So the whole environment of how do you create good software, it has a really big impact on how we feel as we are testing. The test cases, if you have to have them before you're allowed to execute, and if all the conversation is either through those or through bugs, that is an organizational way of removing agency. But then I put the blue ones are things that people were kind of mentioning on things that could increase agency. So doing things in paired fashion, kind of both programming and testing, doing smaller changes and starting from a known good state, splitting work so that it's of the size of the person who is doing it. So you can't give a huge responsibility to someone who is completely junior. They need a new smaller box, but then growing that box, and not having a sprint-based deadline, but work that gets ready when it is ready, so that time also for testing is shifting instead of having to squeeze it in the remaining 2 hours before the demo. So creating that kind of things, I heard someone kind of mention that, and definitely recognize these as things I would also try out. So we have 5 minutes remaining, and this is kind of where I wanted to then direct you to look at things, kind of the detailed mechanisms. So you can see some of the similarities of things that you just talked about in your groups, but also there's probably some differences here. Like for me, the idea of continuous delivery being core of how I manage testing, I find that it's not still very usual one in the community at large. And I have now moved about, I think 15 teams so far into releases that are happening every 2 weeks, when it used to happen every 2 years. And it seems to always be the thing that I do with a new team when I come in, that we find a way of getting to monthly and then twice a month type of releases. I usually have this kind of baselining following the change from the baseline type of activity, lighter documentation, especially on test cases. If anyone asks for test cases, write only titles, like try to negotiate that to be possible. Doing things in incremental way, giving other people feedback, and knowing if there are some things that take longer to prepare for. Like, for example, if you need to buy that €1 million test environment, like I sometimes need to in projects, you won't have it available next Monday. Even shopping for something that expensive is going to take you probably minimum 6 months, probably a year. So if you're going to need a second test environment in a year, the work for that is going to start today, probably. So maybe considering kind of things that move slowly as a separate item. And finally, as kind of the last piece of today, I wanted to just kind of leave you with this. I find that there is so much variation in different teams and different projects, that there will never be kind of, a single process of how you would go about doing exploratory testing. But there are some things that we can do differently, and we can learn to do them in a very small scale with a very small application. So this particular application, I called it Catch-22 application because I thought it had 22 problems that I know of. I tested this week with a group, and they told me about one problem that I did not have on my list. Like if I write here, Hamlet is important. The fact that red is on gray, it is a very obvious bug, and yet I had not listed it on my list of things that I know of. But you don't have the list yet. You can ask for the list if you want to have it, when you have first tried to find these things by yourself. There is a huge number of problems, 23 of things that I know of in this very small application. So you might want to try exploring it, but as a challenge, especially for the group that was talking about how automation needs to be separated, I give you a challenge of doing it so that you are only allowed to explore it through automation. So you have to create a small test case that does the input entry. You can even, this is in the materials for you, so you can even copy exactly what is here. This is Python and Playwright. It's a very, very simple thing. And I removed all the things that document the test cases. So there are maybe data available in this screenshot, but it doesn't tell you what the problem is. But this finds these 21 things here, find 15 of the bugs. So versatile data, even when run with automation, it is a result of exploring. So we maybe should not be thinking of these two things as separate, like we very often tend to do. And while I could run this in CI afterwards, when things are fixed and all of these are kind of, passing in the right way, I might also be exploring things like, this is from my real project right now. Again, very similar UI level script, similar technologies available on this one. But what this does for me is that it goes to my team's system, logs in. Well, you can't access it. It's behind a VPN, so the addresses don't really matter that much here. But you instead of always being there to look at it or having a video that looks at it for the entire day, you could have it writing into a file the information you consider relevant. And then what your testing could be is looking at the whole day of it testing on your computer while you were reading something interesting. And in the end of the day, you could do a session of figuring out, is it changing at right times with the right rules? Or is there not enough of change compared to what you would expect to see in whatever functionality your system ends up having? And it's never the same for different applications. You will need to think of what are the things you would be monitoring. And that's just something that I personally have been using to explore, so that I don't have to have my eyes, attended eyes, always on the thing that I'm doing. So yep, this is what we had for today. Any